Okay, we're going to ratify the Constitution, and this will probably be the last time we're doing a lecture for this semester. First and foremost, ratify simply means to accept. So we have the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation are found to be inept. They don't meet the needs in a variety of ways, and the crescending event that takes place is Shays' Rebellion that shows the weakness of not being able to put down this rebellion. We have delegates come from the states to look at changing and modifying the Articles of Confederation, and that's quickly thrown out. And they'll come instead and write up an entire new document called the Constitution. The Constitutional Convention took 4 months to iron out a compromise document. No one got exactly what they wanted, and then they would vote on it. And it was going to take 9 of the 13 states to ratify it. There are two viewpoints, and the viewpoints are federalist. A federalist is someone who believes that we need a strong central government. They are headed up by Mr. Madison, the father of the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton, a very, very bright guy. He'll be the first Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, and a guy that's just extremely valuable. Will die early in his life. And then George Washington. They will use Shays' Rebellion as a primary example of what happens when you have a weak central government. They will also write these papers called the Federalists, and they will publish them in newspapers nationwide to get support for ratification of the Constitution. Anti-Federalists are very much opposed to the Constitution because they fear it's going to have too much power be given to just one person or one group. They believe that a strong central government would probably serve the interests of the privileged. Now, stop there for a second and let's talk about that. Is, in fact, the government usually serving those that have power or those that are privileged? And I think you make the argument, yeah, it does. We do. It's easier to live in this country if you have money, and it's easier to live in this country if you have influence. We're going to protect those people. They're going to be given a lot more privileges than, say, someone who doesn't have any money or doesn't have any power, doesn't have any property or possessions. The homeless guy doesn't get near as much. So is there some truth to what the Federalists are saying? I think you can say, yeah, there is. They were headed up by Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson. We'll be talking more about him once he becomes the third president, and Samuel Adams. So big time revolutionary heroes. They just really, really feel that this Constitution and a strong central government is going to deny the rights of the people. And so they are really pushing that. They will go to the papers also and say there's just not enough individual rights in this thing called the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights becomes the tipping point of whether or not we're going to ratify the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists were very successful in convincing people that without this protection of rights against the government, that there should never ever be this Constitution be signed. Eventually, the Federalists will concede this, and they will agree to write into the Constitution the Bill of Rights. The Constitution was written and approved in 1787. It then had to go to all of the states, the 13 states. You needed 9 of the 13 states, a 2/3 majority, to be adopted, and it will be adopted in March of 1789. It would be adopted in 1789 on the condition that the Bill of Rights would be also put into the Constitution. And the Bill of Rights was written and ratified in December of 1791. So let's go through that one more time. Constitution is written and it's approved by the delegates in 1787. But now you got to go out to all the states, and the states will then vote on them. All 13 states. All of them will vote, and you will get 11 of the 12 states to adopt the Constitution. The one that took a little bit longer but will come around is Rhode Island. But it is adopted, or it is ratified by all the states in March of 1789 on the condition that the Bill of Rights would then be added, and the Bill of Rights were ratified and added to the Constitution in 1791. There originally was 12 amendments, only 10 of them were accepted. The one amendment, really interesting, the actual second amendment to the Constitution, the original 12 amendments, was pay for the Congress. And it would be another, 200 and some odd years, 220 years, but eventually the 27th Amendment will be pay for Congress. And so the Second Amendment, which was never ratified, the first two amendments were never ratified. The first one had to deal with Congress, how we were going to pick members to be put into the legislative branch. That was not adopted. And then the Second Amendment was pay for Congress. Those were not adopted. So you entered, instead of having the 12 amendments, you had 10 amendments. The U.S. Constitution, without a question, is the model for all other countries. It is the oldest document, living document out there. It has outlasted all other constitutions, not even close. It is an amazing document. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. There are two major viewpoints when looking at the Constitution. There's what we call an originalist, and then there's what we call a non-originalism. Now, an originalist viewpoint is they will take a look at the Constitution or the issue, and they will view that issue from the viewpoint that the Constitution does not change, that the Constitution must be interpreted based off of what the original understanding of the authors had for it. Okay, now this is really, I need you to be careful on here. I think it's real easy to say I don't want to be that, because I don't want to be non-flexible. An originalist takes a look at something and says, this is what the founding fathers of our countries believed in. And what they said was that an issue, whatever you want to pick it to be, maybe it's not pertinent, maybe it's not something that or it's changed the viewpoint on that. For example, slavery changes, but the founding fathers wanted government and the evolution of something to take a long, long time to evolve. They didn't want things to change overnight. They didn't want the latest fad to come in and go, yeah, let's all do that. And then in 10 years, that was a really bad idea, so let's all do this. They wanted something to take time to change. So if they looked at something like voting rights that initially they were only letting white males, voting rights weren't even in the Constitution. It was just assumed that only white males were going to be voting. It took until 1765 and the Civil War to change that. And I think it's actually 1767 that the 15th Amendment went in that said that, you can't discriminate based on the color of your skin to allow blacks to vote. Well, that took a long, long time. Now, again, you could have states at that time, because they're not expressly written in the Constitution, they could have passed laws. And so you could have individual states that felt something about a way about it. If there was something written in the Constitution that you looked at and you said, I really don't think that's pertinent, or it's the way it should be, you can always amend the Constitution. So an originalist says, you can't just willy-nilly and pick things out and say, this is the way we want to go. We want the people to be in control of the government. And the people will change things from state to state. And if they feel strongly enough about it, it's going to take a large group of people to make an amendment to the Constitution. Now, they're non-originalist. Their viewpoint is the Constitution is an evolving and ever-changing document, and it changes as society and culture changes. How do you have a document or a viewpoint that men are the only ruling body class? That changes over time. We're no longer saying that only white males can be in office or only white males can vote. And so the Constitution, by saying all men are created equal, we accepted the fact that in 1789, African Americans were not considered people; they were considered property. But we evolved to now saying, okay, we're changing and we're seeing how things are evolving and and growing. Um, that viewpoint would be very much opposed to the originalists because they would say you're allowing 9 members, that's how many we have on the Supreme Court, to decide major issues instead of allowing the people to decide that issue. And there is some fear in that those 9 people can take an issue and say, hey, we're just going to change it because we want to see the country go in this direction. Well, that was not the intent of the original founders. Who's right? That's for you to decide. The Constitution is an incredibly amazing document. It's only 4,400 words. It's really, really short. It's the oldest shortest Constitution around. When the Constitution was signed in 1789 or 1787, the U.S. population was 4 million. Today it's over 330 million. The fact that we can, though, change the Constitution. We've had a number of constitutions in Europe that are either too rigid or they change willy-nilly every other day. And so none of them have ever lasted. France's constitution today is tomorrow's toilet paper. They've went through a bunch. And America is, again, 240, whatever that is, to 1789 to now. It's a long time, 11 plus 19, 240 years we've had this thing in place. The Constitution has been amended 27 times since its adoption in 1789. Remember the 10 amendments. A lot of people say, well, the first 10 amendments were a condition for the Constitution to be ratified was that we were going to put the Bill of Rights in there. But I guess if you be technical, it really wasn't in there with the original. It waited 2 years to be ratified in 1791. And then from there, we have changed it only the 26 more times. So it's difficult to change. You need to go to the state legislatures. You go to the national legislatures, and the national legislature has to pass with a 2/3 vote for an idea to be passed out to the states. And then it goes to the state legislatures, and the state legislatures have to pass it with a 3/4 majority vote for something to pass. So it's pretty hard for something to go into effect, but it can be changed. So there's just a short little overview of the Constitution of the United States. And now we're getting close to taking ourselves a test.